Hello, this is your host Akhil Navluri, and welcome to the brand new episode of the TechOSpace podcast series. In this podcast episode, I'm super thrilled and honored to be collaborating with one of the most eminent and prominent industry leaders of the IT space and the fintech space and the financial space, Mr. Paul Franks, who happens to be the enterprise account executive of the reputed MNC company, and he's based out of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. So, Paul, it gives me a supreme pleasure to welcome you to this podcast episode of mine. So, Paul, how are you doing? And how are things in at your end? How was your day like?
Firstly, thank you, Akhil, for inviting me along. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a big week. We're in the last month of the quarter, so for those in the software industry, they'll know exactly what I'm referring to. My week has been interesting, educational, but also a good opportunity as always to engage with our customers.
That's pretty nice to hear. And I believe, the weather in Sydney is pretty good because, now I'm also based in the same city that you are in. And I just really love this weather. Only thing is it's a bit humid, but again, the weather is pretty peaceful.
I think you're being a bit kind there. It's extremely humid, unfortunately. So not wonderful for those in business attire.
That is true. That is very much true. Yeah. All right, Paul, pretty much insightful on that about the Sydney weather. So, Paul, without, any further ado, let's kick off with our podcast segment. All right. So, Paul, firstly, can you give me, a timeline of your journey in the IT and the fintech space?
Yeah, sure. So for those who may not know me, I actually have a interesting background. So professionally, I started as a chartered accountant, and then I spent many years in advisory and consultancy to partner level, equity partner level in two firms. And then probably the second chapter or the second half of that career has been primarily technology. A long tenure with a very well-known, well-regarded analytics company, SaaS. And more latterly here with Appian, which is a process automation technology. So I've worn a couple of different hats in the technology space, from heading up FS and so on, but now back to an individual contributor and really focusing on working with and supporting wonderful customers and growing new business accounts. So that's the focus primarily today.
That's pretty nice. That's pretty nice to hear, Paul. So, Paul, when you, ventured into the IT space, what was your immediate reaction like?
Look, I think the IT industry is an exciting industry. No surprise, innovation is top of mind. I think the ability to really have an influence on people's lives, whether that is banking context, customers with digital applications and so on, but certainly more latterly, we've been talking process automation, allowing people to get things done quicker. Hopefully more cost effectively, and certainly with less friction than they may have had in the past. So I think, and obviously I'd be not doing anyone a favour. I did mention AI, and we'll talk a bit more about that, I'm sure, over the course of the session. But the reality is with AI, there is lots of potential. But I'd always say to anybody, with artificial intelligence, you need equal application of natural intelligence. So if that makes sense to your audience.
Absolutely, it does, Paul, and really looking forward for this, and as we head on with it. Now, Paul, can you give me a walkthrough, into you being the enterprise account executive for your current tenure?
Sure. So my role is a sales role, but in having said that, I always think of it as being very helpful, always helpful, hopefully, to our customers. Now, I'm very fortunate to have existing customers, but also part of my role is to have new customers come on board with us and work with us. So it's about understanding their requirements, understanding their needs, but also helping them to make decisions. If that decision is obviously in our favour, great, but also sometimes it means making no decision or alternate decision. So you don't get to be either in tech or advisory if you don't walk and talk in the shoes of the customer. So it's really about making sure their needs are well understood, well interpreted, but then also how do we best help them to solve them, right? So the old saying used to be take their pain away, but I would prefer to say these days helping them navigate their challenges cost effectively, time effectively, and with a really clear focus on business outcome.
So when we talk about, the business outcome, Paul, and, when cost effectiveness is the major thing in the projects, let's say, the budget has gone a little bit higher. So in that case, Paul, what is the next step that you do?
I think look, budgets are interesting things. There's a famous expression from a colleague of mine, a guy I've got a lot of time for, but you should really think more about what is the value generated, and when I mean value, hard savings, right? Hard financial benefits, if you will, making sure they're well understood, well articulated, and they can actually be not just proven from let's call it a business case context, but also hopefully brought to bear in a reasonable time after an application or a technology is live. I think, I'd always say, for me, yes, you can get immediate benefits, that's wonderful, but often there's a transition or a migration or a change out. So if you can realise those within 12 months, that's pretty reasonable, I think. So it's helping them do that. I think you never necessarily lose it on cost. I think if you're talking competitive sales, but I think you tend to lose it more so when you're unable or don't have an ability to articulate genuine business value and a focus on the business outcome or outcomes that you're solving for.
Absolutely, Paul. More than, the budget, sometimes, it goes, haywire, but the value that it provides, that's important. And, and a little bit, if you, pitch in with the budget, that actually helps out the business. And, that's really a right point said, and really love this, narration and explanation by you, Paul. Now, Paul, what is your take, on the importance of AI development curve in the different sectors of the world, or let's say in Australia alike?
Look, there's various velocities of how people are adopting artificial intelligence. I made the comment before that artificial intelligence needs natural intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you need to find use cases that are of merit and of value. And there's probably a tendency or desire. Everyone wants AI to be the shiny toy. Then serious AI or real AI tends to be doing the unloved, the dirty, the grunt work, if you want to give it an expression. And that's not to demean or diminish its value, but genuinely where we've seen real traction, peers of mine, is where AI is doing the heavy lifting and freeing up, resources, whether they be driven by cost parameters or other, but allowing resources to focus where they can add genuine value, right? And getting that, you hear the old expression, time to outcome, time to serve, cost to serve, they're all good metrics and measures, getting that done well. The other part of artificial intelligence is ensuring you've got the guardrails in place. If you're talking about regulated entities, whether they're in the financial services sector or indeed the government sector, there's matters to deal with around the obvious data aspects and access and sovereignty and so on, but also having confidence and assurance that the models, and let's face it, there are models being used, that there is ability to have transparency, auditability, traceability, if you will, and understanding that anyone can come and say, I've got confidence that model or models I've been using for artificial intelligence have actually delivered a genuine response or answer, and they're not, I never like the word, but hallucinating is the old saying in model speak, but they're not hallucinating or giving you incorrect or false positions. It also doesn't diminish the responsibility of the organisation and the people in it who are using it to ensure that the outcome from, if it's a Gen AI prompt or something of that nature or a model, that you actually are confident the response is accurate. It's actually based on genuine data or information sources. We've already seen examples here, but in other jurisdictions where very reputable firms and organisations have come unstuck when they haven't done the due diligence on the results, so to speak. So a little bit longer answer to your question, but there's certainly people doing lots with it. The real challenge now is to move from concept, get it doing heavy lifting, and then use that to demonstrate or prove it is actually adding value to your process and your organisation, and then you build upon that, would be my answer.
Absolutely. That's a very right point. Now, you told me that, it gives me a new question now, in the conversation that we had.
Sure.
You told me that in finance, there are certain guardrails, that people lay out with respect to AI. So I just wanted to know, like in the finance sector, what are the primary guardrails that has to be laid out, when people are implementing AI? Like what exactly can that be?
Yeah, look, there's a variety of them. There's obviously principles and guiding principles, as you're sort of touching upon, and they talk to usage, boundary, if you will, what type of use cases where it makes sense or where it's permitted. It can't be used in violation of, particularly in banking or
Yeah, yeah,
regulated. It can't be used in violation of regulation
yeah.
or more latterly codes of practice. Codes of practice talk about organisational behaviours and how you deal with customers or customer groups, particularly where you've got hardships or financial vulnerability or deceased persons. You've got to be very careful that you don't get yourself into compromised positions where you're
Mhm.
using, right? The other part then, we touched on a moment ago, it's ensuring that it gives genuine responses based on the inputs.
Yeah.
So that talks to having pretty rigorous practices as to how you do prompt engineering in generative AI, for example. And it's actually interesting. I don't know if people subscribed in your podcast, but yeah, I used a lot with my team, and what it really requires you is to have really good structure in your thinking. Right.
Mm.
So back to my earlier comment on natural intelligence, and I'm not suggesting your guests don't have it, but it's getting into that structure and flow, right?
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
don't have to have a big composite prompt. Start it, and then you're refining it, and you're clarifying, refining, clarifying. And I was doing it earlier today, and I was happy with the result, guys. I want to add another dimensional layer to it, and what
Mm.
does that layer really mean for the response I'm seeking? So,
Yeah.
just to close out guardrails, no one is immune from audit. As I touched on auditability, you should be absolutely welcoming being audited or reviewed. Why? Because then people have confidence and assurance in the AI capability you're using. So that tends to be it. There's also, in a development sense, people are isolating, having dedicated in cloud or on-prem situations. They're having dedicated sites or instances where they're generating those prompts. Why? They tend to be better running on production data, so getting them isolated and putting some technical or technology guardrails around those, so you infosec cyber type stuff as well. I think the big pivot for the AI guys in a tech sense will be persistent observability would be how I describe it. And there's many tools out there that can do that today, but ensuring that, that there's a it's not a once off, it's a continuous cycle, because
Yeah.
the
Mm.
models are refined, they develop, they evolve, the skill of the organization evolves as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a right point. And there's a high. I mean, you put it really very clearly to the audience, stating that
Mm.
when you're typing the prompts have to be structured, and also training should be given to people. What is the prompt that you have to type to the AI. Otherwise, the AI is very delusioned. It doesn't understand unless and until
Well,
the
that's
proper
right.
information is given.
The old comment used to be a process of deduction, right? For
Yeah.
those who like their detective shows. So I think deduction is a good way to describe it, and
Mhm.
it's not bad actually. I mean, personally, I think it's a good refresher in logical thinking. So if that helps.
Absolutely. I mean, it's more like, the imaginative world. If you come with your imagination and, give the prompt, things will be better, but provided, not confidential information should be leaked. That's the guardrail you need to put with the AI.
Look, I mean, we've talked here at Appian where I work. We're talking about private AI. So, yeah, you raise a good point. The other guardrail, and it's remiss of me not to mention it. You've now reminded me, but typically, many regulated organisations. Once again, it doesn't matter if they're in the private sector or public sector, they want absolute, and I use the word in big capitals,
Yeah.
absolute assurance the only
Yes.
data they're consuming is their own, and obviously vice versa, no other organisation outside their boundaries is consuming theirs, right? So yeah, it's look, it's pretty topical. There's many ways to solve for it, obviously from a security posture, I guess, but
Yep.
the reality is it's not getting less stringent, it's getting more stringent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Truly, truly, that's a very right point, Paul. Now, Paul, like, would you like to, share your experience of, being chaired and, being a core member of global and, regional banking industry boards across?
Yeah, we touched on this when we were preparing for this session, and I think for me,
Yeah.
it's a good thing to talk about. I mean, so those roles were chairing industry advisory boards and banking industry boards in my former employer, particularly. I think it's interesting. There's always a view that what different jurisdictions and countries are doing is miles ahead. I tend to think of it slightly differently. They're doing roughly the same thing. They're doing it different velocities, different
Hmm.
velocities and different levels of expertise and experience. So I think for me, it was a really good way to see how regulations evolve, particularly in a banking context. We've always had BAL as a real BIS, Bank of International Settlements, as the primary mechanism. How do they cascade down into various regulatory jurisdictions, recognising that not all of them are Westminster type based. They're on different systems,
Yep.
but also different postures. Certain regulatory environments, UK work, that whole trade-off between principles-based and prescriptive-based, right? So lots of lessons learned there. But I think what's really, really interesting when you look at those boards and sharing them is the culture, right? So recognize you've got to be able to work with different cultures, understand how people think in those cultures, and it's certainly, I say that in a positive context. Personally, I always just love working with the Japan teams. Their level of precision is off the charts, and
Yeah.
I absolutely, I probably should declare I'm a massive fan of Japan as a country, but I love the way they think and the level of detail. And when I say that, I certainly don't say it to diminish it. They can bring it up to a very aggregated and summarised level as well. But I used to be fascinated by when they would present a customer success story. It just
Hmm.
always blew my mind, and have a wonderful turn of phrase as well. But that was always helpful. But also, how do we collaborate and work together on major initiatives, particularly with these new regulations coming out? It was a good opportunity to do that, and obviously had the chance, locally to take regulatory regimes, Basel 3 or Reg Cap, if you regulatory capital, if you will,
Yeah.
customising that to the local environment, but also then having the opportunity to compare and contrast that to how it was in a UK context or a, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
sort of Singaporean, Malaysia, and other countries. How are they dealing with those same challenges? In many ways, they're similar, but there's nuance and differences, and interpretive approaches are slightly different. That could be, once again, could be regulatory, it could be also be cultural, right? So you've got things like Islamic finance and
Mhm.
so on, and how do they interplay with regulatory frameworks and so on. So I never did learn. I learned a lot, and what I always enjoyed was seeing people do magic, right? Do wonderful things when the pressure was on. When I say the pressure, the time pressure more so than anything else. So hopefully that
Mhm.
answers your questions. But I wouldn't regret it. I would encourage it. And the power of many minds is always better than the power of one mind. Yeah.
Trust me, the way you were appreciating, the Japan's, fascination with customer success stories really, blew my mind. And I could also relate to that. I'm a huge fan of, the Japanese innovation, their hard work, and I'm a fanboy of Shinkansen train. Every now and then I just check
Makes
that.
two of us. Makes two of us.
Exactly. And that's, I'm really like blown, by the speed that they go. And, you see those countryside villages, and I'm like, wow, what kind of a technology is this? And, such beautiful things. Like, it's like seeing a scenic outside.
Yeah, I think the precision of the mind is fascinating as for those guys. But look, there's other geographies do amazing things. I got the chance to work with the Nordic guys, and they do some pretty cool things as well. The US guys, the dear old Aussies are not bad at it either. So there's plenty of different places. Your home country, I get blown away by the things the
Mm.
guys do there. And they had some. The funny thing I always say is the different boundaries, right? So banks here, I say Australia where I live, but banks here, less customers, bigger numbers. Totally converse in India and others, but their ability to adapt to their context is fascinating. Fascinating.
That,
So.
that's pretty good to hear. And my countrymen and people across India would love to hear this this appreciation from your end. So Paul, like you had this complete experience. So with respect to Pacific Islands, did you have any rendezvous of working with them?
So sorry, would that just repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, with the Pacific Islands, the Pacific Island countries that are close to Australia. So did you ever get a chance of having a work with their regional banks and all?
So much. I had back in the day. I had a little bit of exposure to PNG or Papua New Guinea. You know, it's interesting, I guess, is the way to say it. You know, probably broadening it out. I think the smaller geographies and a little bit of exposure to Mongolia and their banking. They're
Okay.
interesting, but the guys they certainly have aspiration, and you've got to admire the aspiration, right?
Mhm.
So I think everyone, mankind, humankind, aspires to be better than the next
Right.
generation. So he wants to be better
Mhm.
or better off, and sometimes that's easier to say than do, but. The way they look to liberate, I use that word, to liberate their economy, liberate their population is really
Yep.
cool. I suppose the one I always go back to is, the Pacific Islands. The challenge in a lot of them, if you talk my neck of the woods, is they're underbanked, right? Or they're
Mhm.
underserved. And
Right.
generally, the concept of having a branch network is challenging. So how do they
Mhm.
how do they use something like a phone, mobile phone, or a cell phone? How do they use that as their banking
Oh.
interface, right? And things like
Mhm.
that. The other thing you've seen, microfinance, so how the capacity for them to take out a normal loan, whether that's for a mortgage or a secured or unsecured type context or credit cards,
Yep.
they don't tend to have the financial capacity. Generally speaking, there are obviously people who are well off and sufficient to do that, but the broader population I'm referring to maybe not so much. So how do they get access to microfinancing and small loans that you know it's about lifting them up, right? So how do they have
Mhm.
enough capacity? There's probably countries, not just Pacific Islands, not unique. There's plenty in other jurisdictions and
Yeah.
geographies that have the same challenge. But how do you give them enough means financially to get themselves started? And I always say, what's the mindset that goes with the proposition? Because
Yeah.
if the mindset isn't there, the aspiration, if you will, it's somewhat difficult, even if you've got the most clever financing/banking options to present to the population.
Mhm. That completely, answers my question. And, I feel that, they're at a very, let's say at square one level, when it comes to the banking sector in the Pacific Islands. So, that'll take time, for them to expand and, advance, into the future. That completely, I totally agree with that. Now, Paul, like, would you like to, shed some spotlight, into the misinterpretation given by AI in the IT industry?
Look, I think like everything, it goes through its cycle, right? So um, there's a particular analyst that says the hype, right? The hype cycle. I
Okay.
call it the enthusiasm cycle, right? It's great to be enthusiastic about any technology trend or change.
Hmm.
Um, for it to move beyond enthusiasm to realism, if I could say it that way, as I said earlier, you've got to find use cases or opportunities to get it to do things. I think there's a lot of experimentation out there, a lot of trial. The reality is get it doing real work, serious work, right? It might not be the most attractive or pleasant work, right? So I may give the impression artificial intelligence is working the shadows. In some respects, it is. That's where it's best serving, right? So
Yeah.
taking away the mundane, reducing the cost to serve, reducing the friction. In my world, you talk about reducing the swivel of the chair, meaning you're not getting folk having to look at multiple different systems
Hmm.
manually. You're sending an agent. So Agentico sending an agent back to do the work. You're also got the other piece where um, there's a mindset shift with AI as well, right? The traditional way you may have chosen to work and establish and set up your process may need to pivot or change, right? So there's an old saying, and it's not even AI. If you choose to automate a bad process, what do you get? A faster bad process, right? So
Yeah.
you've got to do some process refinement, if you will. I think you've also got to make sure AI is impactful at the optimal point in a banking parlance, a customer journey, if you will, operationally in a servicing function. If it's doing something like newer ones are coming up now, like fraud detection or fin crime ops, you can actually have AI fulfilling the role of an agent in different capacities within the same process framework, right? So that sounds quite weird, I suppose, when you hear about it, but I've seen these demos already, and it's happening today. So it's not a pipe dream, but like any technology initiative, if it doesn't produce tangible business benefit or outcome, it's just a really interesting experiment,
Yeah.
and it doesn't go very far. So those who are achieving success are embedding it in their process, doing real work, hard work, maybe unpleasant or unattractive work, but
Yeah.
liberating. The saying goes like this: no one out there, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No business is saying I want to spend more money doing the same things. Right. So now that could be controversial to your audience, but the reality is the proposition can't be AI is going to allow folk to do very expensive roles where the productivity is probably not at the requisite level, right? So
Mhm.
there's a pivot point there. What I don't agree with, I'll be clear on one thing. I certainly am not a fan of what I see in the marketplace today. That AI is justification for us to remove half our workforce. I've been around long enough to know that is probably gilding the lily, right? So, if you're choosing to right size your workforce, be truthful. I would struggle to believe it's all AI, right? I
Mhm.
would really struggle as someone in technology to believe that. I think some other organisations have been far more mature. They've looked at opportunities with AI to reskill their workforce, and I think that's got some nobility to it, which is great. And they're also contemplating what does a future workforce like where AI isn't an option; it's an embedded capability, right? It's not
Mhm.
it's not it's not on the side anymore. It's inbuilt. It's native. So with that nativity, what does that mean about the composite skill levels or
Yep.
roles, or so composite skills for a particular role in an organizational design? Now, I've had someone tell me organizational design is pretty old school.
Yep.
They've earned the right to keep saying it. I think organizational design is actually more important now than it probably was 20 years ago, right? So, long answer to your question, but that's where I'm seeing it play out. And as said, AI isn't necessarily about being sexy, or
Yeah.
and I know everyone wants to be sexy, but some of the best AI is very far from sexy. But
Mhm.
it's lovely to see it work when it's doing, you know, unattended 24/7 work, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
So now, Paul, you told me that there's a lot of misinterpretation of AI, in the IT industry. So do you think in the IT industry, with respect to the information, that we are getting from the AI, there needs to be a review team stating and giving a direction to the IT team, stating that the information that you've got from AI is wrong. So do you think there needs to be a review team?
You've got to, I don't know. I think that depends on the organisation. Look, any organisation should be quite comfortable with the concept of, let's call it, assurance, right?
Yeah.
Obviously regulatory frameworks mandate things like first and second, third lines of defence and so on. The reality is that the misinterpretation, it's an interesting way to look at it. Uh, I think the context of AI is probably a better way to think of it, right? How do people see artificial intelligence, and
Mhm.
what is genuine artificial intelligence, right?
Right.
In a contemporary sense. So I mentioned generative AI. Um, there is other flavors, of course, but generative AI is pretty topical at the minute. But
Yeah.
having said that, for the historians in the room, AI was around in the 50s, right? But back in
Yeah.
the 50s, yeah. So it hasn't just turned up. The tech has caught up. The deployment options for tech have caught up.
Yeah.
And obviously what is deemed artificial intelligence has obviously expanded from more traditional, machine learning and NLP and or neuralistic programming, all that stuff that was around, right? So there's an evolution there, and you've got these large language models now. What are they doing? They're taking many more data inputs and data points than they probably have done traditionally. Why? Because computing power is relatively cheaper and more accessible than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. So I think the misinterpretation is a factor of, what is your understanding of contemporary tech? It's also what education for the different stakeholders in an organisation, from board to executive to managerial staff and so on. They will have different needs and requirements, and obviously, to your start of this conversation, they'll have different lenses on assurance and compliance, particularly where you've got things like responsible banking, legislation that and if people don't think AI is part of that, you probably need to go and have another look.
Yes.
And it's going to move from this point in time assurance, point in time compliance to continuous assurance, continuous compliance. I might even challenge it and say that, the AI that does your work may be audited, reviewed by AI that's not doing your work, if that makes any sense to your audience, right? It's happening today in fin crime use cases. It's not unusual. It's becoming more normal. So I think what does constitute assurance is interesting to that question. I think the other part too, misinterpretation, but it might be how people evolve around artificial intelligence, right? I think the broader population has a fear of it. They shouldn't. They shouldn't have a fear of it, right? Embrace it, understand it, and I think surprisingly, when they get the opportunity to really see it work, because the media narrative, it's coming to get your job, right?
Yeah.
It could be in some cases, to be fair, but I think more broadly, there is a net noble benefit to the populace by using it, right?
Absolutely, Paul. That answers my question, and a very insightful point on that. Now, Paul, can you give me a walkthrough, of your first day of work at the current company, that you're part with, and when you joined it 3 years ago?
It's an interesting question. I could go many ways with that, but I think it wouldn't matter if it was the current company or work for others. But the old saying goes, use these in proportion to these. Use more of that than less of that. I think you've got to be prepared to observe, understand, navigate, and seek to collaborate and build relationships. Anywhere I've worked, it's been stable tenure. Now, some folk will say to you should be moving every 2 years, and that's entirely their prerogative. But I think, you don't get to enjoy long tenure in organisations if you don't build relationships and bridges and build credibility and respect. So I think, you always seek to do that, and you seek to be helpful and contributing, or a contributor, if you will, to the organisation you work for. I remember coming here and, this organisation is a little smaller than my previous organisation. That's not a negative. That's actually a positive in many respects. But, I think I'd been here a week, and then, can you get up on stage and speak? Sure. So I guess the point is always seek to be helpful and fit in. I've had the opportunity to meet some wonderful customers, and I do love to have my own and bring them in, but I also, I'm blessed I got the opportunity to help and support some existing customers of the organisation. What's their feedback? You bring some different perspective, different lenses. I guess the role here is to respectfully challenge. And when I say that, your audience should understand that as the respectful challenge is, I want you to be better than how I found you. If I can do that for you, I've achieved something for you, the customer. I've achieved something for myself. I've achieved something for the organisation for whom I work. So that's I call it the advocacy model, I guess. So how do we do that and get that working? So that's really been the journey. You should be one of the values here is constructive dissent, and people can misread that, but it's having the courage to speak up when something's not quite right, and I believe I've done that. Others, it's others to judge, but I think I've done that. And you want to grow your people, right? If you want people to work with you and for you, they need to grow. They need to grow with you. And you need to be able to satisfy their aspirations, whatever they may be, and help them get there, right? So I've had the very good fortune of mentoring lots of people. I've been able to do that here as well. It's doing all those things. And I think for me, if you're doing that every day, you're doing okay. Doesn't mean every day's perfect, but that's generally speaking how I like to see the world work, and by and large, that's how it does work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And adding a point to that, when I joined my tenure as a junior consultant in my previous company, in Excel Limited. So there, the thing that I've observed first was, during the lockdown period, it was not easy for us to, build relations and, talk to people, that friend. But when we went to the office space, I was with that kind of a perspective that, no matter what, I'm going to, befriend a lot of people, talk to them. Had I not done that, life would be an island for me. And this would be the same case for everyone who's not interacting with people. So.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we all like connectedness is the word I use, and humans are social animals, so they need to have connectedness.
Yeah.
You can do it over here, of course, but I think if we're true to ourselves, you do need to collaborate in person, and there's an energy you don't necessarily have, right, in a context like a video conference, but they all have their ingredients in place. I think what it did teach us, in these last couple of years, is to have more effective meetings, right? And why do we need a meeting? I think every person there, obviously with that lovely little thing called COVID, we all went through a bit of a cathartic experience, right?
Yeah.
But it was when you were commenting there, what I did reflect on, that it broke down barriers. Hierarchies that may have existed were certainly flattened for the better, I think. By and large, I think that still remains in place. But time will tell.
Absolutely, absolutely, Paul. That's the right point. Now, Paul, would you like to, how would you like to, explain about the terminology of financial services, process optimization in simple words? And having said that, is there any, hands-on use case, that you were involved with in your current tenure? Or let's say in your entire tenure for that matter.
Yeah, look, process automation, as I said before as a comment, it's about ensuring that tasks, activities, procedural steps and the related policies are done in a very effective and efficient manner. And when I say resources, the resources are manifold, right? That could be the systems, the people, even the customers. How do we do that? You hear in the words low friction or frictionless. The words I would use with the least energy possible. Yeah, right. When you do go to automate a process, firstly diagnose the process in its native or current state. Are there opportunities for refinement, improvement, streamlining, consolidation? You pick your flavour of words. And then automate the essence of the process, all right? And you are looking in that process to, are there costs that are no longer required? Does the cost or the effort need to move to a more impactful point in the cycle? You've mentioned assurance a few times. The old analogy for those who've been around, it is much better to put the step earlier in the process than later. Cheaper to do it right the first time than rectify or remediate or fix, right? So I think for me, they're all important steps. They were in my DNA before I came to this organisation. I started in ERPs many years ago, so old school ERPs, the Oracles and what have you. So I think for me, making sure they're in place. And then if you're doing a process automation, are there repeatable, usable componentry, depending on the technology options you use, but even so, are there repeatable, reusable componentry? You don't want to be always building off first principles, and you want to be super crisp that you have good practice, good design hygiene in place when you're building any system. And, I work for a low-code, no-code platform, but the reality is, and I said, the saying always goes, if you automate poor process, you just have faster poor process. That is not an optimized or optimal outcome.
Right.
In terms of use cases, no surprise. In a banking, financial services context, everything from customer onboarding to customer servicing. You're seeing things I quite like is when I see streamlined, especially in institutional banking, where you're seeing streamlined customer servicing, ordering processes. They used to be very disconnected, relied on old Java sort of forms and so on. Now seeing those in tools like Appian, I'm sure there's others, but I work for Appian, so I'll say Appian. But Appian technologies where there was a reduced dependency on emails. It's now an automated case management, and it's role-based, and you have some auto validation, obviously, where it makes sense. You've still got human in the loop in this automation, process automation, but where it's impactful and it makes sense, and you need to have the requisite confidence. Obviously, desired target state is straight through processing for a number of these use cases, but ensuring that that's done when people have the confidence and assurance that is in place. The other use cases we're seeing, there's lots where they're consolidating intelligent documents. So it's this whole thing around organizations have lots of documents, so many documents, and the OCR technologies are becoming less optimal for that. There's a generative AI based capabilities, which obviously the company I work for has, others have too, but how are they being used optimally to not just simply process a document, but can they extract more pertinent, time-bound, high-value information or data, if you will, and use that at all points in the customer journey rather than one point in the customer journey. That's exciting. No surprise, anywhere there's a need for risk or regulatory type use cases. So everything from how do you ensure stress testing is done well, operation risk. So here in this part, Australia, it's CPS 230, in UK it's DORA. There's similar, obviously, regulatory frameworks around operational risk in other jurisdictions, but the reality is that's the dependency that used to be on spreadsheets and emails and one directional population of risk and control assessments. I think the world is moving on. So there's this dynamism, this desire, as I've said a few times over the discussion here, that the luxury of just doing it at a point in time is dissipating quickly. The smart organizations are looking to do this continuously. They are diagnosing systems, diagnosing processes, self-healing in some cases. But they're, for us, we have a tool called Process HQ, which is a process mining type tech. But how do you use that constructively at all points in time to assess the ongoing health of your process, particularly where you've got a high customer sat or NPS type measure in front of you that you need to meet, right? Codes of practice, banking, insurance, they've all got them in different flavors. They have very clear binding obligations on the institution to meet certain behavioural standards, certain service standards. I don't think you leave those to chance anymore, right? They're not a did you do. The system should auto-validate they were actually executed in that manner, right? Firstly, by design, and also by second and third lines of defence measures that are inbuilt into the system. So that's where I'm seeing it going.
Absolutely, that's a perfect roadmap, and giving a good understanding about the thing. Now, Paul, like in the conversation, you told me that there is process mining. So I wanted to understand, like, why do you think process mining is important, in the IT scale?
Big thing for me is people tend to build processes, and over time they degrade. They introduce, I love the word tactical solutions. In other words, manual workarounds. They introduce other things into the mix. You could have product changes, regulatory changes, and you tend to bolt capabilities on because it's expedient to do so. So process mining, or tools like that allow you to diagnose it and see if you're still on the proven track.
Oh, okay.
Have you got inefficiency, whether intentional or unintentional? Do you have steps there that are redundant or no longer required? Could you automate those or have those auto-validating much earlier in the cycle than traditionally? Similarly, everyone's got budgetary pressures, cost pressures. Do you need to do a certain step? Is it necessary, or could you consolidate that and be more impactful and give a greater level of confidence as to compliance? You always talk conformance, compliance, performance, your three dimensions, right? So talking about those and understanding how they interoperate with each other is really important. So you get a chance to diagnose, and then if you're looking to refine it with process mining, you can run iterative versions. What if I chose to take one or more elements? What if I chose this one only? And see the impact from a time, from cost, and resource consumption, resource in every dimension, people, systems, and so on. So if organisations aren't regularly inspecting their processes, and I use the word inspecting, they probably should, right? Because you get cost creep, you get degradation, as I said, and it's a good hygienic practice to bring into play.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the right point, Paul. Now, Paul, what are the key differences, that you have found with respect to the strategical and tactical implementation of use cases in the IT industry?
I think there's been examples of the words I hear are lift and shift, like for like. I understand why. I understand why there may be postures that are taken, but I'd be encouraging organisations to rethink that dynamic. Always take the opportunity to enhance early and correct early. That often means understanding if it's a technology response, understanding what are the features and capabilities of the selected technology you're using? Are you accessing, consuming it? I always love the one we all use productivity tools like Excel and Word. Do we truly know all the features and capabilities? I suspect we do not. So I think easily said, of course, but understanding how you can do that. If you can't do it on day one or day zero, how do you do that fairly rapidly over day 2 and day 3? And obviously those days are referring to whatever your time period is, but not necessarily day 1, 2, and 3 in that sense. But I think for me, understanding how you do that effectively and efficiently, but also the worry I often have is tactical solutions become the strategic because no one chose to take the strategic path. I think in a competitive environment, banking, insurance, and so on, I think you should always take the opportunity to put the strategic lens on it. The old saying is you're only kicking the can down the road. And kicking the can down the road, the can gets bigger and usually more expensive than it did a year or 2 years or 3 years ago. Now, I'm sure there'll be folk that'll be banging their hands and saying that Paul Franks is inflaming me and upsetting me here. I've seen this dance card way too many times, right? So I think my preference personally is always take a strategic view. It will serve you well, whilst it may bring you short-term pain. The payoff and the gain, the benefits are usually much, much better than a tactical response.
Absolutely. So when did you, discover, this kind of, implementation is better? Like in which point of your life, you got that trigger moment?
A long, long time ago. not current. So people think I'm ancient if I tell the years. But, I think for me, I started my career when you didn't have tools like Visio and flowcharting tools. You had to do it manually. It required you to think well because no one wanted to redo the flow charts and the process charts. The point isn't the methodology or the tools, so to speak. It was the methodology that required you to think it through properly, right? And, there used to be a saying in process design, you don't have backward flow in a process.
Hmm.
I still
That
think
is
it's true today, but it often gets forgotten. So I think for me, it's thinking that through. I was very fortunate. Whilst I am in banking these days, I started in mining. So,
hmm.
and mining guys are pretty good at process, despite what others will tell you. So it brings a certain lens to how you think and how you look at the world. And I'm very grateful, to be honest. I had that opportunity, and I'm talking 20 plus, a long time ago.
Hmm.
They don't leave you those sorts of process, that mindset, I guess. And I've said mindset a few times in the session today. You don't tend to forget it. You tend to remember it.
Absolutely. That's a good thing to hear, Paul. Now, Paul, like in your journey, like are there, any interesting success stories and anecdotes, that you have come across that you would like to share with our listeners in this podcast segment?
Yeah, look, always take an opportunity if it's presented to you, right?
Yep.
I sort of said I started off as a chartered accountant. I had a cadetship when I finished school and went to uni as a good boy and all the rest of it. I thought I'd just be a good accounting guy, and I worked out pretty quickly that I had more of a bent for advisory and business and consulting.
Hmm.
I've had different roles, and I've done some assurance as well over time. But I was always very fortunate, certainly professionally, to work on lots of different projects. You know, I got the opportunity to consolidate what we now know as in Australia as Pacific National. I got to help do that. I got to
Oh,
merge. I
okay.
got to merge two banks. I got to merge insurance companies. Um,
Wow. Okay.
I think they teach you new skills. So never be remiss of taking the opportunity to learn. And I always say too, I've been incredibly fortunate to meet lots of amazing people of all walks, right? Board people, executives. Some of those have had profound influence on you, right? By character, by manner, by their work ethic, and particularly how they treat and deal with people, right? So
Hmm.
I think they've had a good way to look at how you see things. Um, and I think, to me, that having the opportunity to do that has been really cool. I said I've always loved banking, but getting to work with trains, that was really different. Apart from riding them to and from my A and B, I didn't know much about the industry. I got the chance to learn all about intermodal transport and freight trains and how they run. And you think we worry about costs in banking, and they take it to a whole new level, right? So things like that. Bringing different organisations together is another skill. So I think always saying yes, I'm happy to take on a new challenge is a big thing.
Hmm.
I came to this organisation to bring on new business, so and I had done that for a couple of years, to be honest. I'd been in different roles, so I had to relearn my old skill set. And
Hmm.
people might have different views of that, but I've enjoyed relearning it. And I think you have that what's the word, the curious or inquisitive mindset, right?
Yeah.
The desire to continue to grow whatever stage of your career you're in. If you don't have that desire, you probably shouldn't be in the role, is probably the nice way to say it. So
Exactly.
that's been a threat, I guess. And to have work in two different professional firms, work in different technology vendors for good tenures, I think you've got to have adaptability is probably the other piece of it, right?
Hmm. That's nice. So now, going back to, you're talking about, curiosity. Now, heading back into the road of nostalgia when you told me that, from uni, you worked into you went into the financial side. So back then, when you were trying to, grasp new knowledge or, new techniques or new topics, did you, note it down somewhere like on a notebook? Or, I mean, I know that back then there was no computer, no laptop as such, but did you, note
There were
it
there
down?
were there were laptops. There were laptops. They were very
Okay.
heavy and very crude, but they were
Mhm.
around. Look, I think those guys who know me well, even today, I carry moleskin or similar type notebooks, and I like my pens. I like my very expensive pens. I always have. I'm a writer. I write things down,
Hmm.
and it's not just the tactile nature of writing; it's the memory build, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, I know folk have things like Remarkable and iPads and whatever, and they use the computer notes.
Yep.
This will be a conversation that'll go on for time immemorial, I think. But there is something quite tangible about handwriting. It's a memory thing. It's a very synchronized hand to brain, if you will.
Yeah.
So I think that's been part of it. But one of the things I used to do when I used to learn, read a lot. Now there's a lot online, but physically picking up books, documents, learning, immerse yourself in the industry of which you participate, right? So, banking is pretty clean, but when I did mining, I went down to underground,
Oh, okay.
300 to 500 meters straight down, and then several k's out from the mine shaft. Trains, I rode on them. Not talking the passengers, I'm talking freight trains. You got to immerse yourself in whatever you choose to be in, right?
Yeah.
You can't spectate from the sidelines and have any credibility. It's a lived experience, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't know, you best find out, and also talk to people who've done it, right? I started doing work in life insurance. People said, "What did you do?" I went and talked to the claims manager. Why? The claims manager dealt with all the claims, but they were usually very quick to tell you where underwriting practices were not on the money, right? So they had a very good insight into the business, and I'm sure there's numerous examples in banking and what have you. But yeah, find those who are in the know, right? There'll be different levels of experience and so on, and get the opportunity to hear from them directly. Yeah?
Absolutely. So, a $1 billion question to you, Paul, since you have a lot of experience, that you can document about. So, did you ever thought of writing your own book, about your life experiences and your
Yes,
teachings and
I've
everything?
threatened to do it a few times. I don't know what genre it would fall into. I've had the absolute pleasure of writing forewords for other people's books, reading other people's manuscripts when they're writing books. Certainly an honour and a pleasure to be asked to do it. I've launched a couple of books for people, which is super cool. I've had a mate who's just written one. Probably surprised me. We've known each other for a long time. I was very surprised that he wrote it. The point I'm making is writing a book these days, it's probably easier in many respects than it was historically.
Yeah.
Obviously, using AI for effective research, not for plagiarism. But look, it'd be an interesting thing to do. Not today, but certainly down the track. The things I've seen, the people I've met, I don't know what it could be the working title, but I've been very fortunate to see lots of things. I still am fortunate to see lots of things. Like this. I hope it's educational for people. I've done plenty of others like these, and they've always people say, "Oh, it's very educational." Well, I hope it's educational, right? Because they're spending time with you, so they've got to take something away. So I hope they've got some takeaways from that. So.
Absolutely. Absolute amazing takeaways I've got, Paul. So, Paul, before, we conclude our podcast session, let's take a lighter route. All this while I was, bombarding you about your journey, questions about, about your journey, about the financial space, about IT, about process optimization, your take on strategic and, tactical implementation. But this time I'm going to go to a very lighter route, talking about your likes and interests in the form of a rapid fire round. So, Paul, are you ready with the first question of the rapid fire round?
Go for it.
Perfect. All right. So, Paul, what is your favorite sport, that you like to follow?
MotoGP, motorcycle racing.
Motorcycle racing. So, who's your favorite sportsman? Or let's say, favorite MotoGP.
Marc Marquez.
Okay. I'm not much into MotoGP, so I'm just guessing is he from Australia?
He's Spanish. He's 9 times world champion. Incredible work ethic, incredible mindset, and his capacity to adapt is incredibly impressive.
All right. And, that's pretty nice. So I think I have to, look about him and, know more about the MotoGP side, probably. And now, Paul, since you told me that, you like MotoGP, so are you also, into let's say motorcycle riding, going across Australia?
I have 2 of them. I don't ride as much as I used to, but I've ridden since I was, I had motocross bikes when I was a youngster, and then I went to road bikes when I was 18. I've had them all my life, so I've always been around them. I don't ride them as much now because I've got another addiction called classic cars, so that's my other thing. So they're taking more of my time restoring and rebuilding them and bringing them to life. So, yeah.
That's nice. That's nice. So what was the place, that you have, during your young years, that you went through your motorcycle? What was the road trip like?
Yeah, look, open roads are great, but I think, for people, I hear lots of comments about, motorcycles are temporary citizens, usually by folk who've never ridden one. Look, anything is dangerous if you choose to not be
Yeah.
conscious of the environment or context you're in. You wear the protective gear. I did all the training. I started on small bikes before I went to large bikes, right?
Yep.
You ride a certain way and so on. For me, open roads are always lovely, nice country roads, things like early mornings. There's something particularly special about the sun shining upon your face, riding into it.
Yeah.
So, context for others might be bicycle riding and so on. But
Mm.
I think being at one with the machine is a very interesting concept. All right.
Mm.
And like anything, if you're into any motorized things or even bicycles, it requires you to maintain your equipment at the optimal level, right? If you don't, it breaks down, you get injured, and so on. So there's an elegance in that for me, right? Keeping them well maintained and all the rest of it.
That's a good piece of advice, that you've given to the young audience, who are so passionate about motorcycle, and, they'll definitely, take it as a guidebook for sure.
A few of your countrymen are engaged with, they love their different bikes and they
They love
absolutely
it.
love it. Yeah.
They love it, and, they go through, different, road trips across India, going through different states. So I've seen a lot of Instagram videos and reels. So, the
Yeah,
craze is huge
that's
there.
right. Across Nepal and all sorts of stuff on their Royal Enfields. And I think they're
Yes.
lovely, right?
Huge fanboy moment there for sure. Now, Paul, since, I come from India and, I'm of the Indian origin. So did you ever, get a chance of, trying Indian food in Sydney?
Yes, way too many times. One of my favourite restaurants close to home is an Indian restaurant. They're lovely people, good fun. We depends if you like your northern or southern, so you'll know what I mean.
Yep.
I like both. My partner has been in India many times. She's a yoga fanatic, so
Oh, okay.
I've had to play along. Otherwise, it'd be a tough road for me. But yeah, look, I think we make it. We make it ourselves. I don't mind making. Curries. All I have learnt though is you've got to be very clear when you say hot or the temperature of your spice. Be very clear. What I
It's going
deem
to be
as
huge.
moderate,
Yeah.
what I deem as moderate is not always moderate, right? So, um, back to
Yeah.
my comment, learned experience. But yeah, I mean, look, it's wonderful food. I like cultural aspects of India a lot. People who know me well. I like my yoga. I like my kirtan, if you know what I'm referring to there.
Yeah.
And there's certain folk and I love the dichotomy of the gods of the north and the south, if that helps, right? So
Oh, really?
Ganesha and all the rest of it. So understanding that, if you come to my home, I've got a very large Ganesha on my wall, which is I had custom made and things like that. So yeah, I find it very balancing, if that helps.
I'm really, glad to know that, you talked about, our Indian gods, and really, I would love to, come to your house and, see that. Really touched by this point, Paul, for sure. No, Paul, you told me that, you have to be clear, with respect to South and North Indian food. So which one do you prefer? Because I'm a South Indian, but my take is North Indian food for sure. So what is your take there?
It depends. It depends how I feel on the day. I don't mind the northern. It's a bit spicier in my mind. It's a bit spicier. So depends where I'm at and during the week. But look, if they give me a Kingfisher beer with it, I'm pretty settled, right? So I love
Yeah.
Kingfisher beer. I'm not saying that to appease your audience. I love it genuinely. So yeah, it's pretty good. But having said that, it depends. It depends what if it's if it's a poultry or a duck or something like that, as opposed to your seafood dishes. But I do love the combination, especially seafood. Right, I love seafood anyway, but some of the seafood curries and things are just next level. They really are. So yeah, very
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. When we talk about North food, they are spicy, but it's not that spicier as compared to the South, South Indian food, the region that where I come from. I come from a region called AP, which is called Andhra
Yeah,
Pradesh.
yeah.
And there the food is literally like next level. They put a lot of spices and it's like next level.
Yeah, and look, and if you've grown up with it, you're accustomed to it. But yeah, sometimes I go,
Yeah.
whoa. And for me, I haven't got a lot of hair on my head, as you can tell. I tend to sweat when it's really hot, but or perspire rather. But yeah, look, the guys I'm referring to close to home, Punjabi sort of background.
Yeah.
So yeah, they mix it up a bit, but they're good guys, and we have a good laugh, right? They when I ring up, say I'm coming to visit you tonight. Kingfisher, yep, and it's amazing. They literally time it. It's ready. So yeah, they're
Hmm.
awesome, right? They're great guys, and their service ethic is what I love, right? The
Right, right.
desire and capacity to serve. So yeah, and I have obviously in being in IT, I have a lot of um, associates and people I work with from Indian origin, and they love the fact. And I don't do it to please them, but I'm genuine when I say I have an interest in things. But it certainly helps when there's a respect of other culture, right? So it's good. It's good fun.
We're really glad to hear that, Paul. Now, Paul, you just talked about the Indian food and, your love for it. Now, when I talk about, your comfort food, what would that be?
Uh, Do you know, I would probably say I like tropical fruits, right? So I love my
Hmm.
stone fruits and things like that. Um, yeah, well, of course, people say they don't like chocolate, they're probably lying to you. But, we all like our chocolate of certain types. I like dark chocolate, preferably. But yeah, I'd be quite happy just eating a lovely bit of stone fruit, or a mango, something like that. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, unfortunately, as you get older, you have to be more discerning about what you eat and not eat.
Indeed,
That
indeed,
helps.
that's true.
Mm.
Absolutely, absolutely, that does. So, Paul, since you're based in Sydney, what are your favorite, three go-to restaurants that you always like to go, other than the Indian one that you mentioned me, apart from that?
I don't know. It depends how I feel in the time, but I love Luke's Kitchen here in Sydney, which is at the Kimpton Margo. Um, I do love my pub food. I know that sounds very pedestrian, but
Mhm.
there's lots of great pubs around Sydney, especially in Rozelle, that I like,
Yeah.
Balmain. Um, and look, Key was great when I was around. That just closed, of course, but the one I always loved, and it's regrettably it's no longer with us, but Tetsuya's right. So, as
Yes,
an
yes, yeah.
optimized experience back in the day, I had
Yeah.
my 40th there. They had a wine from my birth year, which for the mathematicians can work out that year. But the
Yeah.
year and where it fitted, it was just an exquisite experience, right? So I'm sure everyone has other restaurants that have done similar things, but I like where they have a touch to them they don't bring. So Kimpton, the Luke's Kitchen. I've been there many times and never been in doubt. So obviously, anything that Luke Mangan puts together is usually a pretty good experience. If you get to know
Yeah.
Luke in Sydney, pretty good operator, and I think he does a wonderful job. So if you get the chance to go to any of his restaurants, they're all outstanding, right? So
I'll surely be there because, I'm based in Sydney now. So for sure, I'll just grab these
indulge,
points.
indulge, go for it.
Yeah. All right, perfect. That's a good recommendation, for sure, Paul. Now, Paul, if I, have to talk about your favorite movie franchise, what would that be?
I love John Wick. And I love
John
the
Wick.
Equalizer. Yeah, certainly not culturally highbrow, I would say, but I love the hero overcoming. Right, the hero overcoming. My favorite movie though is The Shawshank Redemption.
Wow, that's a brilliant movie for sure. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, dealing with adversity, navigating challenging circumstance,
Yep.
um, you know, um, temperance under pressure, all those lovely things. Right, so
Yep.
yeah, know it well. Watched it many times.
It's a pretty good recommendation for sure, Paul. Now, Paul, what was the last song, that you've heard in your playlist?
Well, the guys in the office they did the Spotify thing and said I've
Yeah.
got I like music comparable with a 69-year-old person. I'm not 69, so I'll put that out there. I tend to like my 70s, 80s, the stuff I grew up with. My current rotation is Luther Vandross. For those who know Luther Vandross, probably one of the best singers of that era. So yeah, so look, I like all genres, but I particularly like great singers. So think of all your Motown, R&B type singers; they tend to be my favourites.
I'm not a fan of today's music. No offense to that, but I love
Mm.
70s, 80s.
Yeah,
80s is my
yeah,
pick.
yeah.
I'm
We
like
live a
huge
lot
fan.
there. We have my partner and I follow a band here in Australia, which is becoming quite well, good internationally. They're a cover band, but they actually do covers better than most of the originals, I would say. To be fair.
Absolutely. That's the right thing, Paul. Now, Paul, they have last three questions of the rapid fire round. So Paul, what was the country, that, you blew your mind? You talked about Japan, but apart from Japan and other things, what was the country, that, struck a chord with you?
Probably got disappointed and say Japan. I've been there several times, and every time I go there, it just I don't know. Take my breath away, be a bit strong, but the people have a way about them. They have a way, right? And I find it intriguing, to be
Yep.
honest. I find it very intriguing. Um, you know, there's probably lots of, I think I'm well travelled. I'm certain there's plenty of people who are more well travelled than me. I love some of the European countries, like I went to Austria. I love the precision of Austria, right?
Okay.
I need to spend more time in your home country. I think that'd be a fair comment.
Yep.
But I tend to like countries where the people embrace you being there, right? They're open. Like I think this country is here where I live, but and you learn from them, right? So the Japanese, I was just there again over Christmas, and their capacity and desire to share their culture is amazing. It's amazing. I was in the north more than the south, so Hokkaido, and
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing place. So that's important. You asked about P&G. I went to P&G many years ago. It was exhilarating and frightening all at the same time,
Yeah.
because
Mm.
but having said that, there's an inner beauty in the people that if you look beyond the superficial, there's something there. I think generally when you travel, be open to see beyond what's in front of you, if that makes sense. Unpack the country you live in, right?
Yes. Yes.
And it's easy to fall into the touristy things. Live like a local. That's where you learn. You learn living like a
Right.
local, right? Yeah.
Exactly. There's one recommendation now, Paul, that I would like to give, since you told me that, how people embrace you, when you go.
Yep.
You should go to a country called, our neighboring country, which is, just the south of us, Sri Lanka. Such a beautiful country, such amazing people, with that warm, that kindest heart. So you will definitely love Sri Lanka. And
they tell me the beaches are awesome. I've heard
they're
that many
amazing.
times.
They're out of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll take that recommendation. Thank you, and put it in my memory bank for future years.
You should definitely. And it's, for me, for us, from India, from the place where I'm based in Hyderabad, it's like 1.5 hour. Just Sri Lanka is 1.5 hour for us.
Nice. Just like going from Sydney to Newcastle for me. So nice and close.
Yes, exact route for sure. Yeah. So, Paul, since you're Australian, what is the thing, that makes you a proud Australian? What are you, so proud about your country?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because you could have a very mixed response these days. I think at a headline level, it's an egalitarian country. It's a very welcoming country. I think we're pretty receptive, accepting of things. I personally like the fact we call out poor behaviour. I don't want to swear because I don't know your audience well enough, but we don't tolerate BS and things like that. So there's a camaraderie here. Many of your country folk have migrated or immigrated here, and I think they've found success and they've grown personally and professionally. So I think the capacity for sharing, capacity for acceptance is pretty high. I wouldn't take everything you read in the media as gospel. I think the media stirs it up to their own agendas, to be candid. That's not just here. I think that's everywhere. I think it's got a natural beauty, just like you spoke of Sri Lanka. I could see myself talking about my country I live in. And I'm probably rare for an Australian. I've been around the whole country. I've seen the interior of our country. So, it's got some amazing things, right? And I when I fly home, I'm always grateful to land, and I say that not because of the aircraft, but it's a pretty nice place to live. It really is.
It is. One thing about, Australian people, first time when I came here, people were so warm, so welcoming, and so friendly, and I just loved it, and I just got along with it, and I just love my stay in Australia for sure.
Yeah, well, that's what I say. I think that's generally how people respond. The media likes playing around, but I think at the essence of folk here, and whether they're born here or they've become residents here, I think for the most part, most people are of the same ilk, right? They have the normal aspirations. We all have the same aspirations, and so on. So
Yes.
I think on balance, it's a pretty good place.
It is for sure. Now, Paul, before we conclude our actual podcast session, now I just wanted to understand, like in your typical Australian accent, would you like to, share your experience of, being part of my podcast initiative, and what was your, thought being part of it?
Oh, look, like all podcasts, you never know where they're going to finish. So I think it's been very well structured. So I appreciate your professionalism. For your audience, it's got to be something where both parties have a natural receptiveness, a natural warmth. So hopefully that's been conveyed, because that's how it's felt for me. And like everything, we've spent the better part of an hour together.
Yep.
If we haven't collaborated for value for your audience, we've failed them. I hope we haven't. Right. So that's probably where I'd leave it. So, and it's always nice, as I said at the start, it's always nice to be asked, and hopefully your asking has been rewarded. So that would be my summary.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. That really means a lot to me and, my team at Teco Space Podcast. It was such a, lovely conversation with you today, especially, talking from the likes of IT, then, your start in finance, then moving to IT, and then, your rendezvous of, working in the mines, that thing you say that, and the way you told that, you have to immerse yourself in what you do rather than, just looking at from the sidewalk. So
Yep.
that was a beautiful point which you just shared. And your fandom with Japan, the way the banking sector works there. So that really struck a chord with me. And all the other things, whether it's about the strategical and the tactical implementation of things, and even, not to mention how you have to train your AI when it gets hallucinated and all of that. So that was a pretty interesting point that I
Oh, I say it's like with power, how Yoda says, with power comes great responsibility. It's the same for AI, right? So
Absolutely, absolutely, Paul. So, Paul, so thank you so much again. So listeners, on this note, this is your host Akhil Navluri signing off. We will be back with another podcast episode with another eminent industry leader very soon. Till then, keep listening. Goodbye, stay tuned, and au revoir.